Hi everybody, how's it going? Yay, we have some people. I am so delighted that we are discussing this brilliant, beautiful and very life-affirming book that's Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. And before we get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who left the most wonderful comments and shared stories of their own lives, and just the response to reading this book was amazing. And it's kind of why I wanted to pick it for this month, because I feel like everyone's going through a little bit of a tough time, and I knew his writing. I hadn't read this before, but I knew he was a good person to spend some time with, and I'm glad I wasn't wrong. And I'm glad that everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. And, you know, even I read it a few weeks ago, and then today I was spending some time going back over it and picking out some bits and putting in some sticky bits. And just going through your questions, and it was just so amazing to, you know, I think we've been all so isolated recently, and you know, this little community that we've all created together has been so special and so wonderful during this whole lockdown. And going through the questions and, you know, sort of hearing from you guys just was so lovely today. So thank you for the last couple of hours that I've spent doing this, and also just for the last few months. So I'm gonna just, I don't know, I think I'm just going to go straight into questions, and then I've written down excerpts of the book that relate to some of the questions, and I feel like we'll sort of take a question, read part of the book, and then go back and forth that way. So, you know how I like to just wing it. But I'm so glad that the response to how the book made people feel has been so positive, because that's what I really wanted. I wanted us all to feel a little bit of, I don't know whether it's catharsis or just that we're not alone, and that these feelings that a lot of us have, you know, probably been having, or that people might have experienced throughout their lives, that, you know, these are not, we're not alone in feeling sometimes a little like lost or fearful or just overwhelmed, I suppose. And it was so lovely of Matt to so beautifully share his journey, and that we can all feel a little bit better about ours. So where's Eddie? Somebody's asking. I'm still not in my own home. I have yet to get back to Scotland, but I've just been, and I apologize as well that this is so delayed, this particular month's book club. As most of you know, I was away filming, so I was in a hotel for 7 weeks, and I had the worst internet, and I felt like it just was better if I waited till I got out of there so we could have a proper conversation. And this better not mean that the internet gods all of a sudden strike me down. Okay, so the first question is from, and I'm going to butcher everybody's name, so I apologize, is from Laura X Alvin. And so this was a lovely thing, and lots of people, and you know, so I've just picked out sort of the first people that I read the questions from, but a lot of people picked out this and asked about this. And this is something that, you know, really struck a chord with me as well. So she wanted to know, how do we feel happy when we are encouraged to feel anxious? And it's relating to page 181. So let's go there. And it was beautiful, this sort of succinct way that Matt had of distilling this idea. And I'll just read and let him say it. But the world is increasingly designed to depress us. Happiness isn't very good for the economy. If we were happy with what we had, why would we need more? How do you sell an anti-aging moisturizer? You make someone worry about aging. How do you get people to vote for a political party? You make them worry about immigration. How do you get them to buy insurance? By making them worry about everything. How do you get them to have plastic surgery? By highlighting their physical flaws. How do you get them to watch a TV show? By making them worry about missing out. How do you get them to buy a new smartphone? By making them feel like they are left behind. To be calm becomes a kind of revolutionary act. To be happy with your own non-upgraded existence, to be comfortable with our messy human selves would not be good for business. Yet we have no other world to live in. And actually, when we really look closely, the world of stuff and advertising is not really life. Life is the other stuff. Life is what is left when you take all that crap away, or at least ignore it for a while. Life is the people who love you. No one will ever choose to stay alive for an iPhone. It's the people we reach via the iPhone that matter. And once we begin to recover and to live again, we do so with new eyes. Things become clearer and we are aware of things we weren't aware of before. Now, this struck a huge chord with me because of, obviously, I think this kind of idea affects everybody, but also a lot of my life I have sort of worked in these industries that promote these unattainable dreams and these unattainable things. And, you know, I started modeling when I was 19 and they're selling, you know, beauty products to women supposedly in their 40s and 50s and using 18 and 19-year-olds and sometimes 16-year-olds to tell them this product makes your skin look like this, and it's bullshit. And so, you know, and it's not something that I haven't thought about before or haven't grappled with. And I often wonder about my part in this kind of fantasy that gets sold and that makes people feel bad about themselves. And it's never something that I wanted to do. You know, I've always wanted to be an actor, to tell stories. And yet somehow, because it's a commercial endeavor, you know, networks don't want your TV show just to put on a TV show. They want your TV show so that they can sell advertisement around it and make money. And it's really strange when you find yourself caught up in that loop and you know, and yet at the same time be susceptible to it. So even from the inside, you know exactly what they're doing, but yet it affects you in the same way. And it's a really difficult thing, I think, for all of us to be, for all of us to kind of resist that. And I think, you know, somebody also mentioned the social dilemma, and I'm going to talk about that later too. But it is this thing of like, we aren't here to just be consumers. And I think that that's something that we all have to really, really fight against, because it's so hard, because you're bombarded everywhere, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, with some sort of messaging and some sort of like imagery that tells you that you're inadequate or that what you have isn't sufficient, and none of it makes us happier. And, you know, I think about during this whole lockdown, I didn't buy one item of clothing because I was like, well, where am I going? You know, I don't need anything. And yet, you know, lockdown was over. I mean, I went away to work, so I didn't buy anything. But like, I've been in London for like 2 days and I'm like, oh, when do I go shopping? It's like, I don't need this stuff. So, and I think also sometimes that can make you feel even worse. And I think that there's something sometimes about these like quick highs. And I think that that's something that we need to sort of, or I need, I mean, I don't know, I'm not telling anybody what to do, but it's something I observe about myself, where when I am feeling low and I think I'm going to do something that's going to make me feel better, and when it's something that's not substantial, you get that really quick high for very few minutes, and then you feel even worse. And so, you know, I think I'm going to talk about my ideas with social media, and it's all a bit controversial because we're doing it on social media. But I think we have entered into a time where there's going to have to be a reckoning, because we're not playing on a level field, and what we're being subjected to is so beyond our own mind's ability to counteract, that something's going to have to be done. Anyway, I will talk more about this because it's obviously something I feel quite passionate about, and I don't know what I just started doing an impression of my friend Sarah, who does an impression of her dad, I think. But yeah, that's that. Okay, so question 2 is from El Mucanto and Anna, Bia and Juliana. And all it says is page 130. I forgot to write the question, I guess. So let's go to page 130 and see if I can remember what that was. Oh, this is about reading. Yes, so obviously I think this chapter spoke to everyone. I have been a massive reader since I was a child. Some of you know the story, like for many years we didn't have TV, but what we did do was go to the library every week. And it was always that thing of going to pick your 3 books. And I have lost myself in reading all my life. And I think that I suffered quite a bit from bad mental health as a child, and didn't really understand what I was going through, and didn't understand why life seemed to be so much more difficult for me than my siblings, or I made it more difficult, or and I had all of these emotions, and I used to have very dark spells, and I didn't know what to do about it. And reading was an escape for me then. And it brought all of these incredible worlds right into our tiny little village in the middle of nowhere in Ireland, where it just seemed like I didn't understand the people around me and they didn't really understand me, or that's how it felt at the time. And it was just so important to me. Reading was so important to me, and it has definitely shaped who I am. And let's read some of Matt's passages, or we'll be here for like 3 hours and nobody needs that. There is this idea that you either read to escape or you read to find yourself. I don't really see the difference. We find ourselves through the process of escaping. It is not where we are, but where we want to go and all that. Is there no way out of the mind? Sylvia Plath famously asked. I had been interested in this question, what it meant, what the answers might be, ever since I had come across it as a teenager in a book of quotations. If there is a way out, a way that isn't death itself, then the exit route is through words. But rather than leave the mind entirely, words help us leave a mind and give us the building blocks to build another one, similar but better, nearby to the old one but with firmer foundations and very often a better view. The object of art is to give life a shape, said Shakespeare, and in my life and in my mess of a mind needed shape. I had lost the plot. There was no linear narrative of me. There was a just mess and chaos. So yes, I loved external narratives for the hope they offered, films, TV dramas, and most of all books. They were, in and of themselves, reasons to stay alive. Every book written is the product of a human mind in a particular state, and all the books together, and you get the end sum of humanity. Add all the books together, and you get the end sum of humanity. Every time I read a great book, I felt I was reading a kind of map, a treasure map, and the treasure I was being directed to was an actual fact myself. But each map was incomplete, and I would only locate the treasure if I read all the books. And so the process of finding my best self was an endless quest, and books themselves seemed to me to reflect this idea. which is why the plot of every book ever can be boiled down to someone is looking for something. I totally I just agree with him on this. I think, and I think many of us think, I think sometimes when you're feeling certain feelings and emotions and you don't really understand, or you don't quite have the narrative or the clarity with which to sort of distill your thought process or distill what you're thinking, and then you read it in a book and you're like, that's exactly, and you have those aha moments and you're like, that's what I'm feeling, or it evokes something in you. So I think it's not just one thing or the other. It's not just escaping or finding. It's both, and it's so beautiful the way he describes that. So God, we're only in question 3 and I picked out 15, so I'll stop waffling so much. So this is from Maria Isabel, sorry. And her question was she talked a little bit about the chapter on famous people, and she wanted to ask, how does the modelling acting industry affect mental health of those that are in it? And I thought that this was kind of interesting because, number one, I think this sort of distinction of sort of this industry is having something special compared to any other industry is not true. But we do have the ability as being in the public eye and having some sort of a platform to be able to share our experiences. And in that way, I think it can be good because, as Matt said, it's helpful to know that other people are going through it. And not that we don't know that, but having that reminder and seeing people in a position of what looks like success, because that's very relative as well. And yet have them sort of say, well, no, look, I struggle with all these things too. I mean, I think that can be helpful. And I know it was helpful to me, and has been helpful to me when I've been going through tough times and had times where I felt terrible. And, I will say one thing about the, modelling and acting and this kind of thing of being inside the beast, and sort of people have a perception, and I think that's one of the things that makes it slightly strange, especially when you don't feel inside, the way that people appear to, or the people think that you should be, because there's an illusion put forward. I'm just Caitriona. I'm just the girl who grew up in the country and then was lucky enough to get some great jobs and loves what she's doing. But I'm still just me, and I'm still going through all the struggles of life, the same as every single other person. And yet, when we go and do these big events, and, and I have a team of people putting me together and making me look a certain way. And, I realize that there's an image put forward that portrays this kind of success, happiness, all of that. And it's not always the case. And I think that there's also a danger within that industry, I think, of people losing touch with reality and losing, I guess, perspective on the things that are really important, because you're sort of put up on a pedestal, and, which is an unreal thing. But if you believe in that, and, there's I could get into the whole thing of like insecurity masked by ego and the dangers of that and all of that kind of thing, but we would definitely be here all night. But I do think it's interesting, and I think, I think that, I hope that more and more people are realizing that this sort of idea of putting forward these unrealistic images, that it's not helpful for anyone. It's not helpful for the person that's behind it, and it's not helpful for society to sort of be subjected to that or be bombarded by that. But I do think, this is one of the good things, the plus side of social media versus the downside, is that People are, having much more one-on-one interactions, and you can dispel those notions, or you can sort of have a more normal interaction rather than it being this sort of very curated one that's sort of put forward, I think. But let's move on. Well, I think let's read a bit from that, actually. 159. I still think it's very strange that I just sit here and talk to myself. One day we're going to have to get everyone in a room together, and when this COVID craziness is over, let's do that. Let's have a big book club meeting, and then I won't feel so crazy talking to myself. Okay. Depression makes you feel alone. That's one of its main symptoms, so it helps to know you are not alone. Given the nature of our society and a confessional celebrity culture, it is often famous people that we hear about having troubles, but it doesn't matter. The more we hear, the better. Well, not always. Being a writer, I don't particularly like thinking about Ernest Hemingway and what he did with his gun, or Sylvia Plath's head in her oven. I didn't even like contemplating too deeply non-writer Vincent van Gogh, or Van Gogh, it's very controversial, and his ear. And when I heard about the contemporary writer I admired, David Foster Wallace, hanging himself on the 12th of September 2008, it actually sparked in me my worst bout of depression since the really bad times. And it doesn't have to be writers. I was one of millions of people not just saddened by Robin Williams' death, but scared of it, as if it somehow made it more likely for us to end up the same way. But then most people with depression, even most famous people with depression, don't end up committing suicide. Mark Twain suffered depression and died of a heart attack. Tennessee Williams died from accidentally choking on the cap of a bottle of eye drops that he frequently used. And then he goes on. I was very, very curious by that. I'd never heard that about Mark Twain, or Tennessee Williams, sorry. But there is a lot of cynicism about depressed celebrities, as if after a certain amount of success and money, a human being becomes immune to mental illness. It is only mental illness that people seem to say this about. They don't say it about the flu, for instance. Unlike a book or a film, depression doesn't have to be about something. Also, one of the things depression does, that it makes you feel guilt. Depression says, look at you with your nice life and your nice boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, kids, dog, sofa, Twitter followers, with your good job, with your lack of physical health problems, with your holiday in Rome to look forward to, with your mortgage nearly paid off, with your non-divorced parents and your whatever, on and on and on. Actually, depression can be exasperated by things being all right externally, because the gulf between what you are feeling and what you're expected to feel becomes larger. And if you feel the same amount of depression as someone would naturally feel in a prisoner of war camp, but you are not in a prisoner of war camp and are instead in a nice semi-detached house in the free world, then you think, crap, this is everything I've ever wanted. Why aren't I happy? And then he quotes the Talking Heads song, which I do love. But yeah, I think that that's something that, we all have, or a lot of people experience, is that sometimes even when everything is going right, you don't always feel that way inside, and it gets compounded by the fact that you're like, why do I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way. And that can be part of the struggle sometimes. But let's move on. I'm not saying hi to anybody. I'm seeing all these names flash by. It's like, hello, everyone. Jacqueline Graciano, Haley Beaupre. Please have a glass of wine next to me. No, I'm actually having a gluten-free beer, and it's quite tasty. So we're going to, oh my God, I'm only on question 4, guys. Alexia Burrus asked about the anti-medication narrative. What was your opinion on this narrative choice and how it affects the audience? But I think Matt spoke quite clearly about the fact that for him that was the choice he made. And, you know, I think it's very important that everyone makes the right decision for themselves. And that you talk to somebody and get proper medical advice. You know, for me, the thing that I found helps the most was going into therapy. I think it's the best gift I've ever given myself, and I didn't get to it until I was in my very early 30s, but it was essential, and it's something that, you know, I'm very fortunate that I could afford then. I realize that it's not always accessible to everybody, and that's really difficult. But I think everyone is so unique, and everyone's experience with either depression or anxiety, or even just mental health struggles, it is so individual. And you know, I think that one of the things, and there's sort of somebody asked a question about it later, in terms of like this being written from a man's perspective and how important it is for men to talk about their mental health issues. Sorry, beer. But one of the things that I think is has been so helpful to me is having such a strong group of friends, girlfriends that I can talk to. And I think that that's often the difference between when men and women struggle with things like this, that men tend not to have, I mean, this is obviously a generalization, but they tend not to have friendships where they feel that they can discuss this kind of stuff with their other guy friends. And that's, I hope, changing. And I think it's slightly changing, and you see much more, especially in the UK at the moment, there's these great initiatives where, you know, I think it's Prince William actually is and different people like that. And there's a lot of footballers are coming out, and obviously Matt talking about mental health issues and trying to start that conversation. But I have always felt that talking about things helps me, because I'm the kind of person, I didn't have an experience like Matt's. I didn't have this kind of one catastrophic breakdown, but I tend to retreat, and I tend to, you know, when things are really bothering me, just sort of shut down. And it's really been my friends that have sort of dragged me out of that have always helped me. So I do think medication can be super beneficial to people who have chemical imbalances in their brain. And I think that, you know, it should be treated by a professional. But I also think there's an over-prescribing of Zoloft and all of these things sometimes. And it's like, oh, you're not feeling well, take a pill. Where I think talk therapy and other kinds of therapy, cognitive therapy, I think can help really get to the root and help. You know, I remember, and my science on this is going to be so layman, so anyone who's really a scientist, I'm really sorry. But one of my best friends, her dad is a neurologist, and I remember him talking about the synapses in our brains, like pathways, and our thoughts fire these synapses. This is where it's all going to get very, very like murky. But it's almost like if you have these repeating patterns of thoughts, you strengthen these synapses. And it's almost like as if you're about to cross a field and you walk on the same pathway every single day and you keep doing that, and it sort of goes from the grass wears away, and then you're in the mud, and then you sort of create like a deep path. And that's what can happen with these negative thoughts and these negative ideas. And you have to find ways of creating new pathways and much more positive and taking a different route. Or at least that's how I understood it. I'm just going to move on to the next question. Let me see, somebody. Yeah. Somebody said pharmaceutical companies pushing drugs is a huge issue. This is true. But it's like, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think for certain people it can be really successful and really helpful, but I do think that there's an overprescription. But hey, I think we need to just encourage everybody to find the best path for themselves. Okay, so God, Fontes Gabby, sorry if I'm butchering your name, wants to ask about Andrea. And what do you think, can love save a person? And she shared that she is 20 years old and that she's in university, and that because of COVID and everything, she feels like her life's not going to amount to anything, and she wanted to know if I've ever felt that way. And I would say yes. It took me a very long time to find my path. I as I said, from a very young age, I sort of had mental health issues and really struggled. And, unlike Matt, I self-medicated, and, I would drink far too much, far too young. And that was sort of my way of getting through things and getting through anxious times. And then that would only exacerbate things and make me feel worse. And, even through my 20s, I really struggled, and I would go through bouts and, wasn't living the healthiest of lifestyles. And, but it took me a long time, and part of that was finding a way of living an authentic life, as in finding the thing that made me really happy and that I could put my energy into in a really positive way. I mean, that's what acting has done for me. It's made me find my peace within myself. I mean, a bit like I think Matt said with his writing. And I really struggled for a long time. And I think that this idea that we need to have this like timeline where it's like, okay, you come out of school, you go to university, and then you know what you're going to do immediately, and then you get into it, and all of a sudden you're successful in your early 20s. But I would counter that. And, I was very lucky that when I was modeling, I was able to afford to do a lot of things, and I was working well, but I was very unhappy. And, I think you just have to have patience and know that things do get better and life gets better. And the more you grow and the more you walk through the fear of things each time, not only does that make you feel better about yourself and you feel stronger and you feel wiser. And if you can, I would travel, because that's always helped me and made me feel better about the world and about humanity and about myself. But I know it's a very stressful time, and I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in university during COVID. This is insane times. But it does get better, I promise. And back to Andrea, I would love to know what she thought. I mean, she sounds like an absolute patient angel. I don't know that I've been so patient in my life with people that I've lived with who were struggling, or not even struggling. I don't think I've been that patient with anyone in my life. I think we should all ask Matt to let Andrea share her side of the story someday. I don't think he's letting her. I'm sure she doesn't want to. But yeah, I think it's amazing to have people who love you. And I think that that's something that, we can sometimes push away when we're not feeling great. But that ability to actually let someone be there for you is a really great moment when you can do that. And as Matt says, love is a reason to live. And I can't remember the quote, but I'll find it. We'll come back to that. I've probably written it down somewhere. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to go to Kelly E. Lawston. So she said the best way to beat a monster is to find a scarier one, from Matt's chapter on that. And has this ever been a driving force for you Do you think trading one monster for another has led to some of the choices that you've made? I don't know, because I've never thought about, when I've been in those things, I think one thing, I've never had that kind of anxiety of, the panic attacks. Thank God I've never suffered from that. I mean, internal anxiety, yes, but the idea that I couldn't walk down the street, I don't think I've ever had that kind of problem. I mean, I think for me, the fear of the unknown, in a weird way, I just never, I don't know how to describe this. I think I used to run a lot from my problems was the thing. And I think for me, finding new things and going to new places was always a really good way of feeling like I could leave behind some of my emotional turmoil. But it follows you, funnily enough. So in the end, you just have to deal with it. But I think that was also maybe a driving force for some of the decisions I made. So I don't know that it was necessarily finding one monster to replace another. I think it was just, I was the monster I was trying to leave behind in the rear view mirror. But hey, we get through it in the end, don't we? So yeah, I'm going to read a little bit from what he says about that. This is where he talks about travel, because this obviously resonated with me. In fact, I felt more normal than I did at home, because here my general anxious awkwardness could pass quite easily for general awkward Britishness. A lot of depressed people turn to travel as an antidote to their symptoms. The great American painter Georgia O'Keeffe, like many other artists that fit the cliché, was a lifelong depressive. In 1933, love Georgia O'Keeffe, by the way, at the age of 46, she was hospitalised following symptoms of uncontrollable crying and a seeming inability to eat or sleep, and other symptoms of depression, anxiety. O'Keeffe's biographer Roxana Robinson said that the hospital stay did little for her. What worked instead was travel. She went to Bermuda and Lake George and New York and Maine and Hawaii. Warmth, languor, and solitude were just what Georgia needed, wrote Robinson. Of course, travel isn't always a solution or even an option, but it certainly helps me. And when I get the chance to go away, I think more than anything, it helps give a sense of perspective. We might be stuck in our minds, but we aren't physically stuck, and unsticking ourselves from our physical location can help dislodge our unhappy mental state. Movement is the antidote to fixedness. After all, and it helps. Sometimes, just sometimes. Travel makes one modest, said Gustave Flaubert. You see what a tiny place you occupy in the world. Such perspective can be strangely liberating, especially when you have an illness that may on one hand lower self-esteem, but on the other hand intensifies the trivial. I mean, I think that sort of resonated with me so much, because travel is one of the things that has propelled me throughout my life to, I don't know, it makes me feel alive. And when I'm stuck in one place like lockdown, that's when I really struggle, because I don't know, I almost need the external stimulation to sort of quiet the voices, shall we say. Let's move on to C Stork 05. Having bouts of depression myself, I found journaling and Pilates seem to be good outlets for depression and anxiety. Haig uses yoga, running, etc. Do you have anything in high stress that keeps you calm? Yes. Exercise is one of the best things, and it's one thing that I struggle with a lot. But when I can, I like to go running. It's one thing, I've really struggled with during lockdown as well, is because I love to go to classes because I feel like I have a place to be, I've paid, I have to show up. And not having that and sort of having to self-discipline to do these things, I've found really, really hard. And when I've had challenges with you amazing people, it's been great for me because there's a bit of accountability and I have to show up and everybody's sort of depending on you, so you sort of do it. But I've found that yoga has been one of my favorite things, and it's really helped me, and it helps me just be in that meditative state, and running's the same. But then also, and I'm going to post a picture of this other book that my wonderful friend Amanda Byram has written about her sort of journey with her mental health and her physical health and how the two have intertwined. But she has gotten me onto doing the cold showers, which has been so good. So I'm not quite at the just a cold shower. I have a bit of a hot shower, and then at the last minute I turn it really cold, and it's amazing. It's amazing what it does for your skin. It's amazing what it does for your mind. I would love to sort of do a Wim Hof thing and go cold water swimming all the time, which is another book that sort of talks about the sort of sea swimming, which I would love to do, and it's something I really want to get into, is this wild swimming. I'm going to forget her name, but it's called I Found My Tribe, and Irish author. I will post it later. I think her surname's Fitzgerald, and I've forgotten her first name. But that, and then cooking. And I'm going to talk a little bit about food and how that can affect your mental health. And it was interesting that Matt said he had IBS, because obviously this is something that is quite, people talk about it now all the time, like gut health, and how your mental health and your gut health are very intertwined, because there's a biodirectional pathway along your vagus nerve, by the way. And it's not even Vargas. I looked it up and then I said it wrong anyway. Vagus nerve. But they're discovering more and more about the relationship between our emotions and our brain and what's going on in our gut. And I think it's no accident that as we have such bad diets in the Western world, we have quite a lot of depression, anxiety, all of these things. And I think that it's something that has to be connected, and they're discovering that it is connected. And so I notice it with myself. If I sort of have a couple of bad, let's say, weeks, because it's COVID and that's what bad days have become bad weeks these times, it really affects my mood and how I feel about myself. And if you live in Northern Europe or any kind of place where the weather is kind of dark and dreary, vitamin D is a huge contributor to your mood and how you feel. And I think it's a hormone regulator. Somebody who's a scientist will talk about this. But I also notice that it hugely affects how I feel. And if you're taking vitamin D, make sure to take it with some K2, because they're symbiotic, and it will stop too much vitamin D from leaching some of the calcium. I think that's what it does. So take vitamin D with K2. But yeah, I think it's so important to find the things that work for you and write them down. And it's this idea of knowing that when you're starting to feel low, yes, you know in the back of your head what works for you, but having a plan, having a map, and being like, okay, I'm starting to feel really shitty. When was the last time I worked out? When was the last time I cooked for myself something really healthy? When was the last time I drew or did something nice for myself in a creative way? And somebody said running's really hard right now when it's dark and dreary. Totally, I'm with you on that. What I love doing, especially if I'm staying in hotels and I don't really know the area, and I'm not that adventurous to just go running around in a strange place on my own, even though I wish I was. I love to put in my headphones, put on some really lovely, happy, banging tunes, and just dance around my room like an idiot for 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe even a half hour if that makes you feel better. But it's that aerobic exercise just to like get your blood going, especially the music makes you feel better, just like releases all that shit in your head. And so that's one thing that I can offer up that's free and winter friendly. Yeah, okay. So, God, this is I'm not going to get to all the questions because this is I'm rambling too much. So Caitriona Z _19. I chose, you had a couple of questions, but I chose this one because no one else had asked it and I quite liked it and I wanted to talk about it a bit. What do you think about the possible connection between depression and belief? Can faith in God and prayer overcome depression? I am not particularly religious myself. I think all of you know that. But I am spiritual, I would say. And I don't know that you can pray anything away, but I think for some people, this idea of the safety of belief and the safety of knowing that there's something protecting you and looking after you can be really helpful. It's not something that I find huge comfort in a kind of organized religion way, but I do know that lots of people do, and I know that my parents are very religious and they have a lot of comfort in that community and in that it's sort of a tribe in a way, right? And I think that those things are very important if they work for you, and that idea of people getting together and not feeling alone and all of those things, I think that that's really important in whatever form it takes. But for me, I think this belief in like, I don't even know what it is. I mean, I've given up thinking about describing it for myself, but in sort of a connective power between people or collective unconsciousness, that does sometimes make me feel good about the world. And, you know, I think definitely a connection to nature, which I believe that is very much part of. And I think that that's one of the things that really can help me, like getting outside and being in the beauty and the majesty of this earth, I think can be something that's really incredible. And for some people that's God, you know, and for some people that's something that God's given them. So I think in that way, if I look at it in that way, then yes, I think that those things can be helpful. I don't know if that really explained it, but that's so going to go to question number 9. So CWAT 0. This is sit back, kids. After reading this book and watching The Social Dilemma, I've been thinking a lot about social media's impact on depression. What responsibilities do you think the companies like Instagram, Facebook have to help with the increase, etc.? I mean, I don't know how many people have watched The Social Dilemma, and there have been a number of documentaries and things recently about all of this. And I think that, as I sort of spoke to earlier, we need to do something about this. And I myself am trying my best to take days where I do not use social media, because I'm looking at what's happening in the world and I'm looking at the absolute vitriol and anger and just polarization of people, and this idea that like kids are now posting selfies and their self-esteem and how they feel about themselves is so caught up in the likes that they're getting, and kids that are 11 years old. And you know, I think in The Social Dilemma, they talk about how child psychologists now have never seen so many children with mental health issues and cutting and suicide attempts and all of these things. And I think we are at a point where, you know, with television, there had to be regulations that came in that stopped certain advertising and stopped certain things for kids. And we need to do something like this. You know, everyone is susceptible to the sort of messaging and the emotional and psychological manipulation that we're all being subjected to by these, you know, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And so if us as adults who've lived our lives away from this, and it's only sort of a new occurrence, can't defend ourselves against this, then how the hell can kids? And I worry about what's happening. You know, I see it with myself. I'm like addicted to my phone. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to it like a bloody idiot on my own. But it's so scary. You know, it's so scary what's happening. It's so scary what's happening politically and socially, and it hugely feeds into people's mental health. You know, I think about all the conspiracy theories that are running rife, and that people are actually, families are being torn apart. You know, when I lived in America, 2 of my ex-boyfriends, their moms were Democrats and their dads were Republican, and they had wonderful, happy marriages, and, you know, everything was normal. They just had minor disagreements on points of politics. It was just small things. And now it's like the hatred between people, and it's not just America, it's here in the UK, and I see it happening in Ireland, and, you know, we know it's happening in places like Brazil, and, you know, even in Spain and in Italy, and this kind of idea of like there's a far right and a far left, and it seems like nobody's left in the middle. And, you know, I would encourage you all to even do one day, and maybe we should all do one day a week, and we should decide on what day it is or something, that we just get off social media and live our lives and think our own thoughts without being constantly having these kind of echo chambers of like, well, you hate this person, so let me show you 10 million things that show you why you should hate them, and you should hate them even more than you hate them. You know, that's not what humanity is supposed to be. We're supposed to find common ground. We're supposed to find things that connect us rather than separate us. And I'm as guilty of it. You know, I get very worked up about things I feel passionately about, but it shouldn't be a cause to like hate somebody and that kind of thing. This is, you know, I'm getting on my soapbox, but I also think that this feeds into feeling bad about ourselves and depression, because I feel like it's these vicious cycles. When we criticize somebody else, it leads to that amplification of critical thinking that we do to ourselves. And likewise, if you flip it, I think the critical conversations we have with ourselves can just make us feel so bad that we project that outwards, and we just start criticizing and judging and negative thinking about other people. And I think it's so important that we don't allow these social media companies, which is what they're doing, is that they're harnessing those kind of vicious circles to get more attention from you, to have you click more and spend more time online. And so it's just bringing out the very, very worst in people and making us feel worse and worse about ourselves. So I'm trying to do at least one day a week, hopefully 2 days a week, where I just step back. And I've been trying to do it recently, and because I really felt like I needed to just, there's so much anger going on, and there's so much just there that it was making me feel just awful about everything. So yeah. I'm going to move on to the next question quickly, or else we're not going to get anywhere. So Semi-Sweet Pete said that he had heard advice, avoid negative people, they'll only bring you down. And he said, any thoughts on this after reading Reasons? Well, I think there's a difference between someone who's struggling with mental health and someone who is negative. Depression isn't negativity. I think it's a mental illness, and it's also, I think, someone who just shits on things and just says everything's like bad, and it's that, as I said, like that kind of negative amplification of just judgment and all of that. If there's something behind that, I think if it's somebody who's important to you in your life, or if it's someone that's close to you, then you figure out what's behind that and you try and help them change, or you try and help them heal. It depends, I guess, whether they're actually struggling with something that is, and that they have the desire to help and the desire to change. I think at a certain point, if someone's bringing you down so much that it's affecting your mental health and they're unwilling to do the work to help themselves, then that's a conversation that you need to have with yourself about, is this negatively affecting your health to a point that this is detrimental to you? But I think if someone in your life who you care about is suffering from depression, then, we should try and do the best that we can to help them. I don't know if that's what you were asking, but yeah. So, I'm going to skip on a little bit because we're almost on the hour. We're 3 minutes away. Okay, I'm going to read two things that I loved, and I'm going to make this 228. I want to have this up on my wall. So it's just self-help. How to Stop Time, Kiss. How to Travel in Time, Read. How to Escape Time, Music. How to Feel Time, Write. How to Release Time, Breathe. Loved that. Loved it so much that you just want to sort of sit and think about each one of those. And then his, I don't think I have time to read out all of them, but his 40 pieces of advice on how to live are just brilliant. I know a lot of you know that I've said this before, but I also think gratitude lists are something my friend Carolina got me into doing, and my friend Mark, and they are so helpful, especially when you're feeling really, really down. It can be really helpful to just write out 5 things that you're really grateful for, and try and, not that it should just make you just be like, oh, look at these 5 things you have, stop feeling bad. But I think it's that thing of trying to just focus the mind a little bit away. God, I have so much more I was going to talk about. There was, Kaylee Treisman talked about how important this book is because it's a discussion of mental health from a man's perspective. So I talked about that a little bit before, and I agree. And I think that if suicide is a symptom of depression, then why do more women suffer from depression but more men commit suicide? I think that, one thing I would take away from that is that talking helps. And so if anyone is feeling bad, if anyone is feeling down, if anyone is suffering from bouts of depression, try and find someone that you trust, that you can just share your thoughts with and you can share your pain with. And the old cliched adage that a problem shared is a problem halved, I believe is very true. And if you are lucky enough to be able to find some therapy or afford therapy, and I understand that that's not always available to everybody, but it definitely helped me. It helped me break some bad patterns that were just hurting myself and walking into situations that were the same over and over again. And I think that that's something that, it's about retraining your brain. away from these negative patterns, I think is a huge thing that therapy can give us. Wow, I have talked for an hour. I've barely even taken a sip of my beer. I'm so grateful to all of you for showing up, for reading the book along with me. My other book, I almost forgot. Okay, so the only thing is, and I have to check, I really, really want to read this book, but I know it's available in a couple of languages, but I'm not sure if they're all. Hold on one second. So I really hope that everyone can join me with this. First of all, the title is just amazing. Breasts and eggs. I mean, who doesn't love both of those? Breasts are great. Eggs are great. It's by Mieko Kawakami. And she is this incredible Japanese writer. So we're going to Japan, guys. I was supposed to travel to Japan in March, and obviously that didn't happen. So this is my little trip to Japan without getting to Japan. So I really hope everyone can get a copy of this and join me on our next book journey. And again, I apologize that this has been so delayed, but I promise the next one will be sooner. So let's plan on 4 weeks from now, roughly, give or take a few days, where we get to discuss breasts and eggs. And I have no idea what it's about. Nothing. So who knows? But I've heard it's really good. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And someone said a very happy birthday to me. Thank you. I've still got 1 week left. But yes, and I don't know if you all heard about the amazingly beautiful thing that a group of fans are doing with the trees. It's so awesome, and it's made me so happy. So if anyone wants to join in, and we'll just plant so many trees and do something really positive and beautiful this year, and hopefully, make a little difference. That would be great too. So, bye everyone. Thank you so much.